Okay, I think we're getting ready to start.
Everything's set,
All right.
Monty Man.
All right, can I have everybody's attention, please?
I
Hello?
don't think they're listening very well.
Cecil, I don't think I have their attention.
They're more concerned about their fellowship.
Hello? We're getting ready to start the show.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I guess we'll just start, regardless if they're paying attention or not. Here we go.
Yep, here we go.
The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship. Now here are your co-hosts, Marv R., Bruce H., and the Monty Man.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Cecil, I don't know what was up with those folks.
Well, I think those people were being kind of rude, Monty Man.
Yeah, I think they were too, but I know a couple of people that aren't rude at all. You know who they are?
Who's that, Monty Man?
Our very special guest, author Mike D., and it's Marv R. and Bruce H., and they're here, ready and raring to go for today's show. But before we get into it, I want everybody to hear this important message from matchingdonors.com.
Hi, this is Olivia Fox. And you know, on the internet, there are tons of special networking websites, but one stands apart for a very special reason. This one saves lives. It's matchingdonors.com. Matchingdonors.com links organ donors with people in need of kidney and other transplants. Did you know in the U.S., 19 people die each day waiting for an organ transplant, and most of them for kidneys? If you've ever considered becoming a living organ donor, or if you're someone in need of an organ transplant, please visit matchingdonors.com, home of the greatest gift of all the gift of life, matchingdonors.com.
All right, well, thank you to matchingdonors.com for that public service announcement. And now, let's get right into it, shall we? It's time for Take 12 Recovery Radio's Stupid Is as Stupid Does News Report.
That's correct, friends. It's time for Take 12 Recovery Radio's Stupid Is as Stupid Does News. That's right, and this week it is brought to you by the folks at Origins Behavioral Healthcare. Visit their website at originsrecovery.com. All right, Mike D is our guest, author of Basic Prayer and Simple Meditation, Letting God In, is the other book, and other books as well. And we're going to be talking with him here in just a few minutes. But before we do that, Mike, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And so you're here, and Bruce and Marv is here, so you need to put up with the Stupid Is, the Stupid Does News. Page 1. Hey, Mike, have you ever eaten your money?
Eaten money?
Yeah, eaten it. You know, swallowed it or...
No.
No, never have. Bruce, Marv? Never? Well, check this out. Johnny Morgan II, a man from Ohio, robbed the savings bank in Asheville, Ohio. It was a pretty standard robbery. Morgan allegedly walked into the bank and handed the teller a note. The teller then handed him an undisclosed amount of money. Morgan then fled on foot and apparently got away, at least for a short period of time. The Asheville Police Department were able to identify Morgan as the suspect, so things already weren't looking good for him, but it was Morgan who pretty much sealed his own fate when he posted a picture of himself on Facebook eating a huge wad of cash shortly after the robbery. So he took a picture of himself, and I saw the picture. It's this huge wad of cash in his mouth, and he posted on the internet. and then he wonders why he got busted. That's stupid as a stupid does. Bad phone call. Here's one. Christopher Andrew Brewer was arrested last Tuesday morning in the parking lot of a Cleveland fast food restaurant after deputies say they responded to his text offer for illegal pain pills. Brewer says he was responding to numerous text requests from an unidentified female who was looking to buy drugs. Brewer admits to dabbling in the drug trade when he was younger, but claims, "I've been clean and sober and straight since March 20th from my release from prison for statutory rape, don't you know?" He says, "I take full responsibility for what I did, but at the same time, the police are trying to make me out like I'm some big drug kingpin in Cleveland." The police captain said, "I didn't intentionally want to sell, I didn't initiate to want to sell drugs. We didn't make any calls at all. He called us. He had the wrong number, but I appreciate that," says Captain Steve Lawson of the Bradley County Sheriff's Office, and maybe he qualifies for the Dumbest Criminal Award. Brewer calls his arrest a setup, saying he texted a woman who for days asked him to get her medications. Now check this out. Brewer insists he had no intention of selling drugs to anyone, but when police pressed him as to why he would make such an offer and then show up at the location at said time, he was rather candid about his motivations. Quote, "Honestly, I was just going to take her money and leave." And that's the honest to God's truth. I'm a truthful guy. So the sheriff said, "So you're going to rip her off?" "Yeah," Brewer confirmed. Captain Steve Lawson and his detectives both informed him that would have been illegal too. Stupid as a stupid does. Number 3, Mario and Domingo. There's a pair for you, huh? A pair of robbers who threatened to shoot a restaurant owner if he didn't give them free food. The owner told the two men he was too busy for a robbery at that time and asked them to come back in an hour. So they did. Well, you know what happened. You know who was waiting for him. Handcuffs.
Wow.
Oh, stupid as a stupid does. Number 4, the term outgunned doesn't quite do this story justice. Derek Mosley strolled into a discount gun store with a baseball bat, smashed a glass display case, and tried to steal a firearm. Yes, he tried to rob a gun shop with a baseball bat. That makes no sense. Well, what happened next? The manager pulled out a gun of his own, pointed it at Derek, and kept him in the crosshairs until the police arrived. If you're going to rob a gun shop, please.
Leaves me speechless.
Yeah, me too. Oh, my gosh. All right, stupid as a stupid as. Number 5, waitress was handed her own stolen ID. I love this. A customer at an Applebee's restaurant handed a waitress the waitress's own stolen driver's license in an attempt to order alcohol. The culprit was a 26-year-old woman, so she didn't even need a false ID to buy her margarita. She handed the waitress the ID that was stolen from the waitress to prove that she was old enough.
Wow.
My kind of girl.
Bruce's kind of girl. Stupid is as stupid does. Number 6. You guys ever drive too slow? Mike, have you ever drive too slow?
Oh, yeah, I have.
Have you, Bruce?
No, I've never.
Marv, you ever drive too slow, buddy?
Sure.
Well, Levi Detweiler, a 17-year-old Amish youth, ran a stop sign in his horse and buggy.
Uh-oh.
Young Levi then led police on a mile-long, low-speed chase. I can just see this. Before taking a turn too sharply and tipping the carriage on its side. Levi was charged with overdriving an animal, amongst some other offenses. I tried to outrun the police one time, and I ended up at a dead end. Where was I going to go? I can't imagine trying some poor Amish kid in a horse and buggy trying out. Oh, my goodness. All right, we got one more here. Number 7, stupid is as stupid does. Creative use of the well-known Sharpie pen. Now, this one takes the cake, you guys. It really does. Joey Miller and Matthew McKinney concocted an ingenious disguise before trying to break into an apartment. Well, we use the term ingenious very loosely. Matthew and Joey decided against traditional disguises like masks or bandanas, instead choosing to draw on their own faces with permanent markers. Here's the thing about permanent markers, right? They don't come off. So when they got pulled over by police, instant ID. Oh, jeez. All right. Stupid as stupid as. Hey, listen, we're giving away $150 worth of recovery goodies next Wednesday on the show, and this is all you have to do to qualify. We're going to give 2 people away this prize, and there's a bunch of stuff in it. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see the description of all the prizes you're going to get. There's CDs and DVDs. Amongst the prizes are a copy of Mike D's books, Basic Prayer and Simple Meditation, and Letting God In. But this is what you got to do. You got to go to Facebook. So you have to have a Facebook account. And you go to facebook.com/groups/Take 12 Recovery Radio, and you join the group. And once you've done that, you'll automatically put into a drawing to $150 worth of recovery literature, CDs, and DVDs. And we're going to announce that on Wednesday the 28th, sometime during the show, who the 2 winners are. So there that is there. All right, that wraps it up for Stupid Is and Stupid Does News Report. All right, we'll be right back right after this. Whether you have completed alcohol treatment or drug rehab multiple times or have never been to any type of structured treatment program, the Benchmark Recovery Center offers a full continuum of care for addiction recovery. This is the Monty Man from Take 12 Recovery Radio. And may I recommend to you Benchmark Recovery Center. They offer an extended care recovery program for adult men and women struggling with alcoholism and drug addiction. Located east of Austin, Texas, on 70 acres, the gender-specific 90-day residential program focuses on the 12 steps, life skills, spirituality, and fitness. After completing the residential phase, residents transition into company-owned sober living and 12 months of aftercare monitoring. If you're ready to learn how to live a sober, responsible, committed life full of promise, Benchmark is here for you. To speak with an admission specialist, call 866-905-4550 or visit the website at benchmarkcenter.com. Discover a life full of permanent sobriety with Benchmark Recovery Center.
Nothing changes if nothing changes.
This is Tony Morosi from the recovery band Self-Esteem, and we're listening to the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show on KHLT Broadcasting.
Well, thank you, Tony. You can visit their website at selfesteem.com. Okie dokie. Here's the deal. We got a little bit of sad news today. It's kind of a bummer for us, but it's not for our friend. This is Marv's last show. Huh, Marv?
I believe so.
At least for Open Forums, the great reality here at Take 12 Radio, on a regular basis. But Marv will, every time you're in town, you need to come by. That's just the way that is. Okay, but this is what we have to say about this being your last show. Marv, it has been an absolute honor to have you with us.
Oh, thank you.
I can't think of a more gentler spirit than Marvar.
Them are all the things you told me.
Oh, shut up. I never said you were gentle. I have another word for you, Brucey. But Marv, it has been a pleasure. It really has been awesome having him, huh, Bruce? I mean,
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
It really has. He has that cowboy way about him, and he just drops those one-liners in there, and
yeah. So we're gonna miss you, man. We're gonna miss you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I've really enjoyed being part of this show too. So,
well, tell the listeners really quick why you're leaving us. You're moving on to deserty pastures.
the high desert.
The high desert, yeah.
Actually, I've wanted to live over there in that country in Eastern Oregon for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I have an opportunity to do that now. And part of what's going on is, even though I've been training horses now for over 30 years, I believe that God wants me to change directions. He doesn't want me to get out of the horse business, but there's a kind of thing going on, and there's this one particular place I'm interested in where they take in abused horses, and at the same time they take in abused kids, and they have a program that helps those kids and helps those horses.
They team them up, right? The
yes,
kids and the horses,
eventually, yes.
Eventually, right.
And it's based on, it's a ministry. It's based on Jesus Christ, and I have a feeling, I guess, intuitiveness or something. It wants me to get involved with that.
Yeah.
And that is over in the area where
you want to live anyway.
Where I like to live.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my motivation.
Yeah, you've sold your ranch here.
Yes.
And that's been a long time coming.
Yes.
And so God's opening doors for you, and gosh, we wish you the best, man.
Thank you.
I had a feeling once, Marv, and look where it led me.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, Bruce, you get this too then. All right.
Mike, don't you think that was a good deal to be led here?
To be led here?
Mm-hmm.
You're asking Mike if it's a good deal that you were led here?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Mike? You think it's a good deal that Bruce is on the show?
Yes, I do. I do.
Bruce will send you a check in the mail for that.
I'll be expecting that.
All right. The topic this week is losing people during step work. And I've asked Mike to join us. Mike, for the listeners who may not know, Mike is the author of several books, and two of which both of our co-hosts, Marv and Bruce, have read. Letting God In, One Alcoholic Talks to Another About AA's Step 4, which is much more, in my opinion, much more than just about AA's Step 4. This book counts the cost with the newcomer. It really does. It explains what a sponsor is. It counts the cost with them. Everybody I work with, I have them read this before we ever even delve into the book, because I want them to understand that this is how I sponsor, and they may not want me to sponsor them once they understand that, but I want them to understand. The other book is Basic Prayer and Simple Meditation. A recovering alcoholic talks about beginning spirituality. Now, before we talk about the topic, Marv, you said something one time about basic prayer and simple meditation, about how relevant it is for the newcomer. You want to share that real quick?
Well, I think it's relevant because most newcomers' perspective of God or a higher power, or however you want to go with that, has been misconstrued by experiences that lead them to believe a whole lot more than what the truth really is. And what I liked about that book was the simplicity and the idea of taking action.
Mm-hmm.
To me, personally, it laid out a structure that was conceivable, believable, however you want to put it, but a plan of action. And the truths about God that sometimes in quote-unquote religious type things really get people screwed up because of where they came from and their belief in what God is.
Right.
So, kudos to that book, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Okay, we've talked about this a little bit before. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. It's been my experience, anyway, that when I'm working with somebody, that if I'm going to lose them, it's usually not after they've read, like, Letting God In, or if they've read the first 164 pages, which is the customary thing, you know. It's usually not then. They're still ready and willing, and they answer the question. Are you willing to go to any length? They say sure, because they really don't know what that means. But they say yes, and you try to explain it to them. You qualify them. You do all this stuff. In fact, on Facebook, somebody said when I posted the promo poster for this show, says, why did we lose so many people during their step work? One person said because their opinion was because we don't qualify them to see if they're truly alcoholics or addicts, and so we lose them. That was one person's opinion. Another person said because they're not ready. Somebody said because they're not being honest. I mean, there's all sorts of opinions and answers to this. But it does seem that if we don't lose them at step 4, which that's been my experience with a lot, we certainly lose them at step 9, which is the amends step. So I invited Mike D to come on and kind of share his viewpoint about this, because he's been particularly interested in the fact that we lose people at the amends step. And I wanted to talk to him about both these. So Mike, what are your thoughts on this? What's going on with people?
Well, I think we lose people at step 9 because that's a real different action. It's one thing to sit down and write out your resentments and write out the things that you fear and all those things. That's something that's going on between you and a piece of paper. But when it comes to step 9, that's when they have to engage with someone that they've harmed in the past, and they're scared. Of course, we know that we're always scared at step 4, but this is a different kind of scared. It seems to me that I've had to really, really talk and really, really work to keep people on that 9th step path, because that's when they get cold feet. It gets real squirrely for them right there.
So if they do get past the 4th step, and I think one of the reasons we lose people at the 4th step is because they realize we're going to be digging some stuff up and they're going to have to look at themselves. But if we get them past the 4th step, we still have a danger of losing them at step 9, because they're actually engaging other people. And let me ask you this, Mike. So why don't they just stop working this step? Why do they discontinue even showing up at meetings? I mean, it seems like they just vanish.
Well, I have seen people try to stop in the middle of step 9, and I've heard of a lot of people in meetings talk about that they did part of their amends, but the rest of them they just didn't do, and they said that they felt that the best thing they could do is just make living amends to society by just staying sober. And it was their way of copping out on step 9.
I agree with that.
So that's a cop-out, right, Bruce?
Yes.
My experience was step 9 was the step that changed me the most. And I started out with my smallest amends, the ones that were the easiest ones, and it seemed like each time I did an amend, I got a little bit more willingness to do the next one, and it carried me through. And I had to push myself through it. I'm not going to lie, I had to push myself through it, but I got a little bit more willingness with each amend.
Yeah, I think that not only that, Mike, with me is that when I learned I didn't have enough forgiveness in me, all I had been forgiven for, and I wasn't willing to forgive others for I could make a proper amends.
Well, yeah, I fully understand that. That's something that I was able to deal with at step 4, the forgiveness part.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I had a few serious resentments that I didn't think I'd ever be able to let go of, and it took some doing.
Mm-hmm.
Marv, what's your experience been with the amends process in the beginning? Was it difficult for you?
Yeah. But what I've got to give credit to on that is the support that I had from those closest to me. In particular, and this guy isn't even in AA, but he's been, for the lack of any other words, but my spiritual advisor,
right,
for well over 30 years. And we're still friends today and close friends. And it's because of his wisdom and insight that, and of course God, that I was able to come up with the courage to do what I needed to do. So,
Mike, a lot of people come into the rooms, and they have no one. I mean, there's no family. There's no pastor. There's no rabbi. There's no spiritual advisor. There's no friends. I mean, if they had friends, many of them have bailed on them by now because they've burned so many bridges. And by the time they get to step 9, they may not have the support like Marv had. You think that could be a contributing factor?
I wouldn't be surprised if it is a contributing factor, but I think that strong sponsorship is where the main support has to come from. Someone who has actually done those amends before.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. How are you going to ask somebody to do something or walk with them through this if you haven't done it? I mean,
exactly.
That's a fact.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Mike, you and I were talking the other day about how people will use this term "a living amends" as a cop out. You kind of touched on it earlier, and I mentioned my favorite cop out is, well, I know I shoplifted from that grocery store, so I'm going to take the grocery cart back every time I shop there now. First of all, you got the audacity of shopping there anyway, without making the amends, the store you ripped off, now you continue to shop there. It's kind of gutsy as far as I'm concerned. But now you're going to make amends by taking the shopping cart back and calling that a living amends. Mike, is that a living amends, or is that just a bunch of BS?
Well, what I've understood people to mean when they say I'm going to make living amends is that I'm just going to stay sober and that's enough. It's not. There's not even an attempt to even take a shopping cart back. It's just like I think I've done well enough just by living a sober life now. I've changed my life, and that's enough. Well, it's not enough. That doesn't change you inside.
So we've got more work to do on the inside, and that's not going to cut it.
Remember, it's by our conduct that a lot of this is doing, you know what I mean? And so
changes, you mean?
Yes.
Our conduct?
Yeah. When I make a living amends with my family, it's an ongoing amends besides what I had to do, what I had to make up for. And then I'm making a living amends today with them, but that doesn't cancel out that there was other things that I had to set
Oh,
straight.
so you're saying a true living amends, according to Bruce, then would be you make the initial direct amends, whatever that is. I owe you money, I pay you back, whatever the thing is. But then you continued to live out the amends process by your conduct.
Yeah.
What would you say to that, Mike?
Well, I believe that's perfectly valid because you have made the attempt to correct your wrongs in the first place. You've taken an action to correct a wrong that you did in the past, and then of course after that you fortify that by living a good life now, and that's perfectly valid.
Yeah. So going.
Yeah, look, Ma, I'm sober doesn't really get it.
Yeah, right. Well, I always crack up at comedian Mark Lundholm when he says, look, I got a driver's license, and the person's like 40 years old and nobody's cheering. We have a friend that says, another guy by the name of Mike. He says, "What do you want? A marching band?" I mean, you're supposed to be sober, you ninny. So we kind of want to be rewarded or expect that we've done our part just by living the way we're supposed to live, and that doesn't cut it. How frustrating is this for a sponsor who's worked with somebody all the way up to the 9th step, and then we lose them?
Well, I had it happen to me, and it was very frustrating. And the guy left me as left sponsorship with me, and I don't know whether he intended to try to stay sober or whether he intended to drink, but he ended up drinking. And I told him, I said, you don't know what you're doing to yourself here. I said, this is not as hard as you think. And he said, no, I'm just not going to do it. And I lost one guy, and I always felt bad about that, but, it was his own choice.
Yeah. So it's sad, isn't it? I mean, because this can be a lot of work. I think we make it more work than what it has to be sometimes, but it's still more work than many of us were used to when we came in the rooms. Going through this process of admitting complete defeat to start out with, and the 12 and 12 says no one cares to admit complete defeat. I mean that really pokes at our pride and our ego. But
Right.
going from there. To surrendering to a power greater than ourselves, to starting to work on an inventory, and then getting to a place where we're ready to make the amends, and then we bail. That's a lot of work to get to, my gosh.
We've invested a lot by that time.
Yeah. And so have our sponsors. Now, what can a sponsor do, Mike, to maybe help and contribute to this not happening from the very start?
What can a sponsor do? Well, I think it depends on the individual, and sometimes you have to play that by ear with the individual that you're working with, depending on what their line of thinking is. But I think that about all you can do is talk to them and encourage them. And, of course, I always prayed with my sponsorees. I always have. And I've seen that change a lot of attitudes. I've seen it change their attitude when I could talk till I was blue in the face and couldn't change their attitude. And I've just seen God do it, over and over again.
Right. Let's delve into the spiritual realm into this thing a little bit, and I'm going to be very bold here, but I can do that. This is Take 12 Radio. This is not AA, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Do you think that when a person has a living, breathing relationship with the Lord, that their desire to move forward through a 9th step and actually complete it has more fuel behind it than if they don't?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. If they have a living, breathing relationship with the Lord
Yeah.
in the beginning,
Yeah, by the time they get to the ninth step, if they've surrendered to Christ in their recovery, I'm asking you this as a fellow Christian now, not necessarily an AA member, but if they've surrendered to Christ, do you think they've got more fuel behind them to actually be willing to make amends?
yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think there are a few steps ahead there. But one thing we have to remember is, I believe, is that as we're going through the steps, we are going through a process of developing a living, breathing relationship with God.
Sure.
And we're opening ourselves up to allow Him in to shower His grace upon us. And so it's a whole process that we're going through, and if we haven't gotten to step 9 yet, or we haven't completed that step, there's still more to do. There's still part of us that's closed off.
Ah, okay. And some of the areas that we're closed off to, Bruce, want to comment?
Yeah, the forgiveness part, and the spiritual part. If you have a living, breathing relationship with the Lord, and I believe when you're working step 9, as you go along, as we're walking along, and we're doing this, that you'll come under a heavy conviction. I did. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to make this amends, and I come under a conviction where that knot was in my stomach, and I knew the only way I was going to get rid of this was to forgive this person like I had been forgiven, and because I didn't think I had to, because he was talking about my past wife. You know what I mean? About my dead wife. And so I was hanging on to that, and so I really didn't know enough about forgiveness. But once I did that, that went away. You see?
Yeah.
That was removed.
So we're still holding on to the resentment. We're probably not going to be making any amends.
Right.
Because we haven't learned forgiveness.
We're not going to want to make an amend if we
we can't
feel that person was in the wrong.
And even if we do make an amends, it's not going to be a proper amends.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've made a few of those.
Yeah. So you'll come, and I think that's the blessing that's behind that, is whereas we're doing the steps, like Mike said, we're growing.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And,
right.
And our dependence and our trust, see, with Him as we're walking with Him. And then when we get into 10 and 11, and 11 especially, we should be growing at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Marv, you finished reading a book by Dick B. Was it The Power of God? Was that the one?
I believe, yeah.
Yeah. And you had made mention that, the fellowship today is not like the fellowship of yesteryear.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of difference.
A lot of difference.
Those old boys came right to the point, and it was all about accepting Christ as your Savior.
Yeah.
And today they just bounce around the old bush and kind of, half-true suppositions and innuendos, and it's a lot different.
And therefore we have closed-minded discussion meetings instead of solution-focused meetings in many cases. Now, I'm not saying in all, but more than what should be, right?
I'm sorry, but my opinion, I think so.
Yeah. Mike, what do you think, man? Are we in trouble?
I think we're in a little bit of trouble. I don't think that we're in more trouble than God can get us out of, but I do believe that we have strayed away from the path in 12-step recovery.
Yeah. So how do we get back on, Mike?
The only way I know to get back on track is if I'm working with an individual, I can put him on track and I can keep him on track. But that's just one person at a time. But of course, that's why I wrote the books I wrote.
Right. And by the way, listeners, if you'd like a copy of Mike's book, you can go to mikedauthor.blogspot.com. You can also go to the link on our website. It'll be right under the description of our featured broadcast, as well as under our partners link that show those that support Take 12 Radio. And you can click on there and you can get his books too. All right, we're losing people during step work, and that's the title of the show: losing people during their step work. And it's confusing to me how a person can be dying and recognize that they're dying, and they're taking a whole bunch of people down with them, and it appears they have the willingness of a drowning man. But as soon as much is required of them, or even not too much is required of them, they bail. Now, we've talked on the show before about sometimes we don't know what God's up to. We see them as bailing, and we see them as giving up, and they may be. But God may be up to something. You think, Mike, that there's reason to celebrate and to trust God and say, you know what, maybe God is doing a work even though we're not seeing it?
Yes, I think that part of sponsorship is trusting the power of God in your in everything you do in sponsorship. I learned a long time ago to mistrust myself and trust God that He loves this person more than I do.
Amen, brother.
And I'd like to address something that we were just talking about.
Yeah,
we were talking about losing people early on, and I know that back in the old, well, probably let's say 50 years ago, when a person came into an AA group, it wasn't going to be but a few minutes, so they were going to start to hear the real solution of the 12 steps.
Yeah.
The real solution to their recovery. And I think it's possible to go to a meeting a day for 6 months and not ever really hear the full solution. And you'll listen to a lot of people talk about their feelings and what kind of a day they had, and you'll be able to relate to that, but you still haven't gotten a solution yet. And if you go to an AA meeting every day for 5 or 6 months and you don't hear the solution, why are you going to stay?
Yeah, good question. Why wouldn't you drop out?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
See, I was one of the lucky ones when I accidentally stumbled into meetings where there were a lot of old timers who had worked the steps and had that spiritual awakening, and it didn't take very long before I was starting to hear about the solution in the 12 steps. I always felt that was God working in my life. Right. Because I didn't mean to go to those meetings.
Right.
I didn't really intend to. I didn't know one AA meeting from another,
Right, right.
But I just happened to get in there with the right people, and every meeting they were talking about the steps. And it even took me in my alcoholic mind at the time, it took me a while to comprehend it all and start to put two and two together, that the reason they'd been sober for 15 or 20 years is that they did these things. And they actually did them.
And we've gone from literature-based meetings to fellowship-based meetings.
Yes.
Some meetings won't even allow you to bring the big book into the meeting, which just blows my mind. I'm just
blows mine too.
That's just a trip. Some of the literature, even the book Living Sober, for instance, very nice little warm fuzzy book. But if you read Living Sober and then you read the big book, you would swear it's two different programs.
Yeah, you could come to that conclusion.
Yeah. So we talked. Bruce, you said something last week. You said some of this stuff needs to be done on one-on-one basis and maybe not in the meetings. But can we not, Mike? Don't you think get too general in the meetings to where all we're doing is having coffee?
Well,
We could have coffee anywhere.
Yeah, and it's like Mike said, the solution isn't there. It's just jumping around the bush.
Right. So maybe we need to get back to talking more about the solution in the meetings.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. But also what I don't hear in the meeting, it's covered up, is the problem.
Right. Well, you hear people talking about their dysfunction,
Yeah.
but not really understanding what the problem is.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand the problem, you're not going to understand the solution. If you don't understand the solution, you're not going to understand the problem.
I
Right?
lose most of the people that I lose is because they don't understand step one. And so what I started doing was taking people through the book as a way to get acquainted with them, and then they could make a decision whether they wanted to do what was in that book or what they were hearing in meetings, because they've been so inundated with his 90 meetings in 90 days and all these other things,
Right.
and thinking that meetings are the solution.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been your experience too, right, Mike?
Yes, I think that too many newcomers believe that AA is the fellowship, the collection of people in the group, and I think it's possible that we've given the group too much power. We like to say sometimes that there's power in the group, that we have a collective power. But if you've got 20 people in a meeting and every one of them is powerless over alcohol, where's the power?
Right.
Yeah.
There's no power in
If you're powerless and I'm powerless, 0 plus 0 equals 0.
Well, it's
zero. Exactly. And I've said that very thing before. 0 plus 0 is equals 0.
Marv?
0.
well. Hold on a minute. I at this point, and of course, this is looking back, but let me just say this real quick. When I came into the meetings, and not everybody does this, but it occurred to me immediately, looking, on the wall at the steps and the traditions, immediately, almost, I knew I had to change my way of thinking. And it was the spiritual part of the program that actually kept drawing me back. It wasn't because I'm not very social anyway. It wasn't the social event.
Right.
You
It
know.
was God in the meetings, not God in the people.
Yeah.
It was God's presence that was there.
And I was aware of that. I couldn't define it at that
Right.
time or anything. But I guess what I'm trying to say is based on the situation you guys just got through discussing, where's the faith? Where's the faith that even though this is all seems like a bunch of humdrum, no solution, social, and all that,
Right.
I can't believe there isn't people in that situation that don't have faith that God is in the room and working, and that there is a progress going on or a process that we can't see.
Mike, you want to address that?
I certainly do believe that there's the power of God is in the meeting, and it's there because there are people in the meeting who have faith in the power of God. What I was trying to say is that sometimes we get the idea that this old the old saying that we can do what I cannot. Well, if we're all powerless over alcohol, there's not much we can do. But we can't do anything unless God is on the scene.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Yes.
God is on the scene.
Yes.
I remember going into AA meetings and feeling the presence of God at certain times.
Yes.
I don't disagree with you on that.
I think that one of the problems that I have with this whole thing is that if we're doing the 12 steps and we're supposed to be but trying to find a power by which to live. I think it's my job not to let people become meeting dependent or sponsor dependent or even step dependent.
Right.
They're trying to learn to be God dependent.
It is our job because it says in working with others, it says remind the prospect. Who's the prospect? The newcomer, the one that you're about to work with, that his recovery is not dependent upon people, but is dependent on his relationship with God.
Right.
It's telling us to tell them that. So you're right. It is our job, right, Mike?
You don't want to develop a dependence on people. You definitely want to develop over a period of time through working the steps. You want to develop a dependence on God, and that's a lifelong process.
Sure, that's true. That's growing and continue to grow.
Yes, and continue.
Mm-hmm.
But what gets me a little bit jacked up, not in a bad way, but any of us that have spent any time in meeting, I don't know how many times I walked out of there scratching my head and amazed at how God uses different people to affect somebody in particular by, what am I trying to say? Well, we talked about it before the show, so-and-so didn't like the way I talked because I used the horse business as a way to minister the Lord's work, And I walk out of there how many times and I thought, wow, that guy really or that girl really said something that's going to help people. And we just don't know because we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We don't know what that is exactly, but we know that God was there working. That's the part that keeps me enthralled and keeps me watching and listening when I go to meetings.
Yeah. I was in a meeting some years ago, that was just as toxic can be. I mean, it was going sideways every way you could think. I mean, it was all I could do to not throw up. I mean, it was one of the, I mean, when people say, well, there's no such thing as a bad meeting, my answer to that is you haven't been to enough of them, because you're going to find them, because people are people. But this was just the epitome of just disgusting. And somebody said in the middle of it all, they said 3 words, and it blew my mind. They said, I am an alcoholic. And it was the first time they had ever said it in almost 6 years of going to meetings, and the tears streaming down their face. And when I know this man, and in the midst of all the craziness that was going on in that hour and a half, this guy admitted complete defeat. And ever since then, he has been living for God. He's got a great job, a great family. He's moved forward. So in the midst of all the crazy insanity, 3 words were spoken, and it changed that man's life forever.
Yeah, and we don't know how it affected
somebody else.
That's what amazes me.
Yeah.
Do you think that? Do you think those 3 words just? You said the meeting was going sideways, and he said that. Do you think that brought it back right to the center where it needed to be?
Actually, it did.
Yeah,
it did. You could have heard a pin drop in there.
Sounds like
it. Yeah. Sometimes the simplest thing spoken is the thing that really moves people. Well, we are out of time. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
And any last thought? Well, you know what? Let me touch on something real quick before we sign off. One of my pet peeves. This really doesn't have a lot to do with losing people during step work. Well, maybe it does. Actually, it could. Is when they read the 9th step promises in a meeting as if those were the promises that are going to come true as long as you keep coming to meetings and drink bad coffee.
Yeah.
at the very least, they ought to preface it by saying these are the 9th step promises. People are wondering, newcomers are wondering, I'm on step 3, but I'm not financially stable. Well, it's because you haven't made any amends to the people you owe money to. You're not even there yet. But we're reading these 9th step promises as if they are something people are going to experience just by hanging out in the rooms. Are we doing people an injustice by doing that, Mike?
I think that I've probably been to all the meetings that I go to. I would imagine that 30% of them have been, the topic was the promises, but no discussion about how you get those promises.
That's what I liked about your books, Mike, is in those books, it's very clear that we have to take action.
Yes.
And that to me was a big deal for newcomers.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people say, well, I like the promises being read. Well, of course you do. It makes you feel good.
Yeah, it's uplifting.
You know, but none of it's coming true unless you do the work. You know,
if you haven't done the work yet, and you keep hearing those promises, and you haven't done the work, and you're not experiencing those promises in your life, it all sounds like a big lie.
Yeah, and you'll just get
sounds like a big fairy tale.
You'll just get angry.
Yeah, I suppose there are people who could walk out of a meeting with the topic being the promises and feel a little bit angry because they might think, well, maybe other people get those, but I'm sure not getting them, and I don't know why. I've been going to meetings for 2 years.
Yeah. Bruce is over there grinning like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the people I know just build a story around them for they can say what they think they've got from them, and
right.
Yeah.
And they're just blowing wind.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter what I came in to Alcoholics Anonymous with or any other 12-step program. It was all the prejudices and the contempt and the old ideas that I brought with me. I was able to look at through this process and was led through that, and those got set aside for I could go to God with a different attitude. And when that happened, he came. And that's the marvelous thing about these 12 steps. And I think like any other program, we want to add to those or say this is okay or shoot dice with our lives. You know what I mean? Because something tickles our ear, we think that's just swell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes we forget that it's a 12-step program, and it'll cover this. I did the steps around God, and I did the steps around the church, and and those things, type of things, because I had such contempt and ideas that came to me through my life.
I love what Chris Schroeder and Chris Raymer and Myers Raymer and Mark Houston and all these guys would say. They'd say, if you're not willing to do these 12 steps, what are you doing in a 12-step fellowship? It's a valid question. What are you doing here? Mike,
and that's not to say that meetings you don't hear these things and these other wonderful things don't happen. They do.
They do. Sure. Okay. Mike, any last words for us, brother?
Well, the only thing I would want to say in the final stages of this discussion is that in my whole sobriety, I had never heard one thing in a meeting that changed my life. But the actions that I took, that my sponsor guided me through the 12 steps, every single one of those things, those actions that I took, changed my life a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, until I came to a point where I had a faith that I'd never had before. It was the actions that I took that changed me inside. It was never anything that somebody said in a meeting. Now, sometimes I would hear things that inspired me to work a step
Right.
or continue to take action. Some of those things were encouraging, especially from those old-timers, which most of them are passed away by now, and because they were old then, and I thought they were ancient. But those men and women changed my life by inspiring me to keep going. But it was the actions that I took that actually did change my life.
Amen. Amen. Well, listen, folks, we are out of time. Much thanks to Mike D. Author. You can visit his website, mikedauthor.blogspot.com. You can order his books. Marv, thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce, thank you.
Nice to talk with you, Mike.
Nice to talk to you guys, too. It was great.
And Marv, gosh, I just...
Don't say no more. I'm going to cry.
I won't miss you, brother. I'm going to miss you terribly, you know?
I'm still a big emotional misfit.
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Me
don't.
too.
I want to be the tough guy, but
All right. Well, my friends, keep Marv in your prayers as he makes his transition. And gosh, just best to you, brother. I know you're going to be helping a lot of people, and it's one of the things that you've been wanting to do for a long time. So congratulations.
Yeah. Gonna miss you guys.
Yeah, miss you too, buddy. All right, my friends. Well, hey, listen, that wraps it up for another episode of The Great Reality here at Take12Radio.com on your internet dial. Don't forget, you can email us at Take12Radio@Comcast.net. Also, please, I encourage you to join our Facebook group at Facebook.com/groups/Take12 Recovery Radio. Join the group. You'll be entered into the drawing to win $150 worth of recovery goodies, which will be announced next Wednesday, so you don't want to miss that. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty Man, along with Marv, Bruce, and our very special guest, Mike D. We're wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty.